everybody, welcome to the county seat today. I'm your host, Chad Booth. With a new round of elected officials and people fresh off of an election and the beginning of a legislative session, there is a conversation afoot about how important is it really for your county commissioners, particularly in rural parts of the state, to be engaged at the legislature in Washington with organizations. Because there are some people who think that that's way too much money and way too much time for their local commissioners to spend. We call the term around our office county isolationists, but is it the best way to go? That's the topic of our show, and we are going to delve right into it by doing an anatomy or a character study of a commissioner who puts in a lot of hours outside the county to represent his county.
I'm Darren Bushman. I'm a second-term county commissioner in Paiute County. When you're a commissioner in a little county like Paiute, you have a lot of different roles. I'm responsible for our ambulance service. If I'm not in meetings, I might be running on the ambulance. Our day starts early sometimes, 3 o'clock in the morning. That pager goes off and we're there. So we wear a lot of different hats and we do a lot of different stuff in a little county like Paiute. You know, as a commissioner, one thing about it is you can make your job as big or as small as you want to make it, depending upon what you want to take on and the challenges that you want to address. The interesting thing about it that I found as a commissioner is you could literally be in a meeting somewhere every day, and you know, we're part-time commissioners, but you could certainly fill your days, 40, 60 hours a week as a commissioner. So you have to pick and choose. You have to decide what areas you want to focus on, what efforts you want to move forward. But the job can be as big or as small as you want to make it. My personal impact, I'm not taking full credit for it by any means, but things that I have worked on, lobbied for, worked to get to rural Utah, not just Paiute County, but rural Utah. Since I've been a commissioner, right now my tally's at about $18.3 million that I have personally been involved in one way or another, either lobbying for, making the request for, filing the grant application, that sort of thing. But when we talk about getting the return on investment of a commissioner, that's what I think you need to be looking at. What are they bringing to your county? What are they protecting your citizens from? And what are the end results financially?
Oh, we're extremely proud of our commissioners here in Paiute County. They do us a great job, and we're very pleased to have who we have there to represent us and take care of all of our concerns. Our commissioners set up new opportunities for us and put us in front of the right, open some doors for us to expand and grow our business here in Paiute County.
The first year that I was a commissioner, I went to the legislative session because I felt it was important to understand what it was that the legislature was doing to affect our counties. But one of the outcomes from that was I started to build relationships with, state representatives and staff and whatnot. And through our Utah Association of Counties or through our National Association of Counties, I soon realized that the networking was as critical as being present. Building those relationships and knowing who was involved in what and who we could call on when we needed support. Over the years, I've made that a focus for myself, is to build those relationships, to participate in the events of Utah Association of Counties, the National Association of Counties. I think it's critical that we're involved in those types of events so that we build the relationships, so that we have relationships we can call on when we do have a problem. As commissioners that we're responsible for, the success of our county and the financial viability of our county, we're excited when we have constituents come to us with projects. We want to help in any way we can. We have the contacts, we have the relationships, and we're able to work through those relationships, whether at the state level or the federal level, to help our constituents get what they need and do what they want to do. It's important to be able to go out and find what it is that your county needs, lobby for it, advocate for it, and do those types of things so that your county gets what it truly needs. I looked at all of our search and rescue equipment was being stored outside, and it just wasn't, it wasn't conducive to a good, safe operation, and it was also, costing the county a lot in maintenance and that sort of thing. So I went out and worked and went after grant money, and we ended up building a facility that we could actually store that equipment. Prioritizing your time when you have a full-time job and you're a county commissioner is a little bit difficult, and certainly there are things that I would like to get involved with that I just don't because I've got responsibilities at my full-time employment. But I try to look at those things and figure out which is most important and which things I absolutely have to. I'm lucky in that my other commissioners are willing to trade off. When there are things that I can't go to, they do. So we balance that between the three of us and figure out who's going to go cover what and make sure that our county is represented in various aspects and various meetings that we need to be at. You know, looking forward to see other county commissioners actively participate and diligently work in building those networks and building those relationships. And you know, as new commissioners come on board, this is a really critical thing to understand. We have a lot of new commissioners throughout the state this year. I think it's absolutely crucial for commissioners to get involved at this level and start building that network and networking effectively.
Well, that completes the story. Got a good look at what it's like to be a rural county commissioner, and we're going to take up a discussion of, on the other side, of the people that rely on their input to make their jobs easier in government. We'll be back with the county seat in just a minute.
Years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
There are meetings, and then there are gatherings. At the Davis Conference Center, we know the difference. Turn your event into something more than just another business summit. With over 70,000 square feet of flexible meeting space, state-of-the-art presentation amenities, and inspiring architecture, the Davis Conference Center is designed to deliver stellar results in a majestic setting. Take your convention to the next level. Schedule now at davisconferencecenter.com.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're continuing our conversation about the importance of advocacy. We've seen it from the county side. Now we're going to have a conversation with people that are on the receiving end of all that advice and hard work, representing three different areas of government, from the Office of the Governor, Deputy Chief of Staff Mike Maurer, Ryan Wilcox, who now in his private sector life used to formerly be known for being an aide or a state rep for U.S. Senator Mike Lee. And we have Representative Carl Albrecht, who has background as in the energy field and has been serving as a state legislator, District 70, right?
That's correct.
Thank you all for joining me. So in the story, we saw Darren Darren Bushman talk about how much time he spends on the road and how much he advocates for the county. How often do commissioners show up in the governor's office? Because most people think that's a rare connection.
The governor really tries to be accessible to county commissioners and to city and other elected officials. The challenge comes down to the number and the calendar. For example, we have 248 cities and towns in Utah. We have 29 counties, and that's just representing those entities, not considering special service districts, schools, school boards association. There are numerous entities out there, And frankly, one of the best ways for locally elected officials to get their voice heard by the governor and by legislators and by others is by joining associations and being very actively involved there, rather than trying to do a one-on-one on a local issue with the governor.
So do people think that these meetings with whether we've got delegations come back to Washington or to the governor's office or even up here to the legislature, a lot of people sit at home and go, oh yeah, that's just a photo op. That's just a chance for Commissioner Summers to get his picture taken with somebody. Is this really important to the governor to have these kinds of conversations?
They're very important. And again, if there's an area that has an emergency or a crisis, you can jump on it and work with them, with an individual community. But if it's an issue like zoning or something that has a statewide impact, they're really better off forming together with, for example, the Utah Association of Counties or the Leagues of Cities and Towns, and letting those entities help them shape their messaging, help them shape policy, and use those associations to work with the governor and the legislature. Really quick, the governor always says he's a big fan of team. Together, everyone achieves more. As the governor came up, he was a member, he was the president of the board of of the Utah Association of Realtors. He's been the president of the National Governors Association. He's been the chairman of the Council of State Governments. Why does he do those associations? Because when states band together, their voice is better heard in Washington. The same applies to locally elected officials and other entities who are otherwise just kind of out there on their own.
You know, Carl, you've been out there on both sides, and I want to talk about advocacy not only for the county itself, but for entities within the county. Have county commissioners helped, when you were involved in the energy industry, move the needle in areas at federal and state level?
Oh, no doubt. When I was CEO of Garcane Energy, I would come up here and testify before committees. The county commissioners would come along and help me on rural electric issues that affected rural Utah. All the time in rural Utah, with all the public lands, we're dealing with rights of ways and those types of things. And to have them sitting next to me at the witness table is huge. As a legislator, it's even become more paramount, because I've run a few bills for rural Utah in my 2 years up here. This is my third session, and the rural economic development issues that I try to champion and the public lands issues that I try to champion. If I can have a commissioner or a city mayor or even a school superintendent sit by me and tell me and tell the committee how it affects their organizations and how it affects their counties, that's huge. It doesn't have to be a long testimony, but to have them sit in front of the committee and answer hard questions and say how it's going to impact their communities is big time for rural Utah.
So I want to redirect one question to you, and then I want to go into some case studies of stuff. But for Ryan, from a national level, this element that Mike talks about being associated with organizations like UAC or NACO, if a commissioner from rural Utah were to contact your office back in Washington, I'm sure that the senator would try and make time to meet with them.
Sure.
If they can go as a delegation representing an organization such as UAC or even all of NACO, does that really give him a different kind of leverage or a different kind of incentive to act?
Sure, that's a great question, because essentially the situation that Mike described, 29 counties and all of that, when you're talking about a national level, that's only exacerbated, that's only highlighted by the fact that now we're talking about 50 states. So it's not just, you know, some of those states literally have hundreds of counties, unlike the state of Utah. Now, of course, when someone from Utah contacts the senator's office, they receive priority in the queue. But there's always going to be that question in the back of the scheduler's mind, and who's trying to make time for the senator, is this the priority at this moment? Is this the most important thing to do? When someone comes in with a group of folks from UAC or NACO or all of that, he can be comfortable, the scheduler can be comfortable with the fact that this is representing more than just one community. Not that that one's not critical, but that this is speaking for rural Utah. That's more important, I think, for rural Utah. We've talked about that quite a bit with the public lands issues, but when we're talking about an area that most folks do not understand from a policy perspective, you're talking about changes that are made on the Wasatch Front, and they're just dramatically different from a perspective of the laws that are made than how they affect lives in the rural communities. So when they work together, when they come through UAC and they come back to DC, or even if they're just working with us here in the state, speaking with that united voice through that organization amplifies their effect.
So I do have a follow-up question to that, and I'm going to save it through the break. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on the county seat. We will be right back with our discussion on the importance of counties and advocacy. Stay with us.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
My daughter and I had just finished a run at this place called Eagle Point. It's this really cool but kind of challenging ski resort that has a real family feel to it. She was so excited because she beat me down the run. Deja vu. I saw myself as a kid out skiing my mom. It was a big moment for me. And all of a sudden it hit me. I was making the same memories for her.
Beaver County, Utah. Make it more than a vacation.
Utah has a national treasure where winding canyons stretch to the horizon, where nature forms elegant structures, and where iconic monuments of the West stand tall. Visitors around the world come to get a glimpse of southern Utah's legendary landscape and landmarks. Join them and explore San Juan County, Utah's canyon country.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are having a conversation today about the advocacy issue of local representatives. I want to talk about a technical part of this because all three of you in your jobs, you had to make decisions that were going to affect legislation or policy. They're going to have a real impact on the ground. What is that expert witness element that county representatives bring to the table?
Let me start one really quick, and I'll use an example of Tammy Pearson, who is a Beaver County Commissioner. Tammy brought the issue. For years we've had challenges with wild horses and burros on the West Desert, overgrazing. It's harmful for the environment. It's harmful, frankly, to those animals. And Tammy brought a laser-like focus as a county commissioner and as a rancher to that focus and has elevated it to a national level and is starting to get results. But she didn't just do it as one person. She got the Utah Association of Counties involved. She got the Senator's office involved. She got the Governor's office involved. But she did it because she was part of a network, and that made her much more effective. And Commissioner Tammy Pearson's a great example of utilizing networks and resources to accomplish something that's been a long festering problem in the West.
Carl, can you write good legislation without input from counties when they have to execute it?
Well, that's very difficult to do because those individuals that are sitting those seats of county commissioners and mayors, they know the problem up front and personal, and they know what they'd like to do to resolve it. So their input is very important. I was going to mention, Chad, that a couple of years ago we took a tour bus and took legislators to rural Utah. And what an education for the urban legislators. Yeah. That was huge, and we need to do that about every 2 or 3 years because even though it costs a little money. A lot of that's donated, but they meet with these folks and talk about the issues in their counties and see it up front. And I can tell you, when Speaker Hughes was a speaker, he come up to me and he says, "Carl, I had no idea." And to bring those county commissioners up here and testify in committee hearings when I'm running a bill, that is huge.
Oh, I could imagine. You know, there's another side of it. Darren, in our interviews with him, alluded to the fact that, you know, his interests or his requirement as a good county commissioner doesn't always just involve what's good for county policy, but has to intervene in helping individuals out and greasing the skids. At a national level, Ryan, is that network of relationships that you make, would they succeed if they didn't build networks?
No, it's impossible. In fact, when Mike was talking about Tammy's experience earlier, Commissioner down in Beaver County, she was able to leverage the issue because of her relationships that she'd built through these networks. Right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work without that. In fact, if we wait until the 45-day session, until day 30, when things really start to heat up here on Capitol Hill, and there's something that's important to you, and you don't have a relationship that you need with the legislators that matter, then you're already behind the 8 ball. It's too late, and from a federal or state.
And to carry that a little further, speaking of Wild Horse and Burros and Tammy Pearson, I'm going to run a small appropriation for Beaver County. Even though I don't represent it, I understand what the problem is. I've been out there, I've seen it, and if these county commissioners think that isolationism is the best, then they need to consider the appropriation requests that we also carry besides legislation, because we do that for them. That helps them in certain areas.
So, just as a point, before the delegation came to Washington to talk about wild horses, seeing as how we've picked this as our sample, how long before that, because I mean, practically every meeting I go to, Ryan, I saw you at representing Senator Lee. We go on range tours, you're there. We go to management meetings for UAC, you're there. Go to NACO, you show up. So you're just like like a bad shadow. You just show up all the time. But my question is, how long in advance of an official contact do your conversations through networking and being at these events start to develop the dialogue and the awareness of these issues?
They start from day one, and this goes back a little bit to effectiveness of elected officials in their roles. Those who don't engage just aren't going to be as effective in changing policy. It's not a punishment or by any means. We have very well-meaning people here, but those who have the relationships, who have invested in those from day one, are going to be that much more effective in affecting the policy that they want to see.
So it seemed a little bit like trust, and I hope you'll trust me to take a quick commercial break. We'll come back for final thoughts here on the county seat.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
Beautiful scene, isn't it? The great wide spaces of the wild, wild west. Hi, I'm Chad Booth, host of At Your Leisure. I'm asking you to support the Blue Ribbon Coalition. Their efforts responsibly preserve access to our public lands. If it were not for the Blue Ribbon Coalition and their efforts, you may not have access to millions of acres of land across the West. This is America's playground, and if we don't do anything, we are going to lose it. Join
participate, and donate. All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
Welcome back to the county seat. We have been talking about advocacy, the relationship of county officials, and the importance of them engaging with other branches of government. So I want to go to final thoughts. Carl, we'll start with you and go right down the table.
Okay, thanks, Chad. Speaking of Paiute County, Commissioner Bushman helped me draft legislation last year on the READY program, the Rural Economic Development Incentives. A great bill for rural Utah. I just made some amendments to that bill yesterday in the Economic Development Committee. If you don't think county commission involvement on the state level is important, I think you need to look at some of the counties that aren't involved. Because those that are on the cutting edge up here. They get some funding from appropriations, and they get some legislation passed that'll help rural Utah. And if we don't start doing something in rural Utah, these folks on the Wasatch Front are going to die in their own smoke.
There you go. Ryan?
You know, these organizations are essentially built on relationships. And I've highlighted it before, but I can't overemphasize the importance of having those relationships in place before the emergency, before you need the emergency meeting with the Secretary of the Interior. If we can make that connection in Washington on an existing relationship, the chances of us even pulling that off are astronomically higher.
Final thoughts from the governor's office. The governor welcomes involvement, but he's limited by 24 hours a day and 365 days a year and 3.2 million Utahns. If you want to have your voice heard, first of all, get involved. But second, get involved with an association that shares your concerns and shares your perspective. Because united, you can have a much stronger voice and a much louder voice to be heard throughout the state and the nation. So for counties, come together. For cities, come together. For citizens, come together. It's the best way to participate in our democratic process.
One last quick point, Chad, and that is that it works both ways. So it's not only just the amplified voice from the county organization, it's also better government from the other side.
Yeah.
Like we're better representatives, we better understand as you work together, and we can advocate for a united voice from the state.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for watching. We appreciate your participation in the county seat. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be more than a bystander. Be involved. Get engaged. Share this with your friends. Share it on social media, and we'll see you next week on the county seat.